This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Tuesday. It's October 3rd, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. First story I want to cover today is that Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to run, I believe, now as an independent. I think that's pretty clear. He's determined the Democratic Party is going to block him from the primaries. He's not going to have a chance to win in the primaries at all. They'll be out there making sure that he is completely shut out. I'd say that Robert Kennedy Jr. is probably the biggest threat to the Democrats around, and they're more concerned about him than they are about Trump. They spent an enormous amount of time trying to neutralize Trump, and Trump had his first day in court on the civil case in New York City, where he is being charged with having inflated the values of his properties and committing fraud. I think the case has very little substance to it. Will almost certainly be reversed on appeal if he's convicted. It's a civil case. But Robert Kennedy Jr. as an independent offers a totally different dynamic for the elections. Very few, I'm sure, listening remember the election in which George H.W. Bush lost his re-election bid. That was in 1996. I mean, it seems like an eternity ago. That's like 30 years ago already, when Ross Perot ran against, we had a three-way race. You had Bill Clinton, you had Ross Perot, and you had George H.W. Bush, who was a sitting president. And Ross Perot, who was a business executive from Texas, had a very engaging style on TV at the time. He had these flashcards, and he was showing flashcards about the economy. He was worried at that time about how much money we were printing and the debt. He wanted to get things under control. He was worried about the size of government in Washington. Of course, George H.W. Bush turned out to be a globalist, and Bill Clinton a socialist. And Clinton sneaked in because Perot took so many votes away from George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush lost, even though he had done extremely well in the Gulf War, in 1991, 92 period of time when George H.W. Bush was president to start with, was a very bright period of time for him, because after Vietnam, the first real resurgence of American military power came with the Gulf War. Now, Robert Kennedy, I think, has a chance to really take this election by storm. I think he's going to draw votes as well from Trump and from Biden. I don't know that Biden's going to be the candidate. I can't really imagine it. The Biden impeachment is heating up. The hearings are going on in the House. I'm sure it will come to a House vote. And it's very possible the House may actually vote to impeach. They should, given the evidence that's available about the Biden crime family bribery. And now we've got Senator Menendez of New Jersey, who's also been indicted on bribery for working with Egypt. The Democrats' bribery, corruption should hurt them in the election. Of course, these are not stories being covered by the mainstream media. Robert Kennedy is going to have, I think, a great platform running on exposing what happened with the death of his father, Robert Kennedy Sr., and Jack Kennedy, his uncle. And I will have a book out yet this year. I'm just finishing it now with a very prominent author in the JFK field. And I think the book is going to be shocking to everyone with the evidence that we're going to bring forward. Watch for it, please. And I'll have more about that as we get closer to it. At any rate, you also have Matt Gaetz in the House, who is now going to file a motion to vacate against Kevin McCarthy. What that means is that the motion says essentially that Kevin McCarthy has not fulfilled his responsibilities and his promise to the GOP leadership in the House, and he's removed from the seat. It will go to a floor vote. I doubt if it will pass. I think a lot of the Democrats will not vote to remove Kevin McCarthy because they like him. He's doing their bidding. The Democrats won everything they basically wanted in this recent not shut down the government, and the 31 or 32 of the GOP congressmen and women who were in this Freedom Caucus had a great shot at blocking all this until McCarthy pulled some maneuvers like he usually does and got enough of the Democrats to go along with what he wanted to do to keep the government open for another 4 months. We'll repeat this crisis again in another 4 months. This is dysfunctional government. And our politics is right now, I'd say, more chaotic and more in crisis than I've seen it ever, especially with the allegations of voter fraud, the concerns over the integrity of our elections, which is a legitimate concern. And going forward, I think we are a very polarized country. I saw some more rioting going down in Atlanta. A black man, I believe, was shot, and a white police officer showed up to deal with the issue. There's video of this now out. I think Newsmax covered it yesterday. And the white officer was not being permitted to come into the black neighborhood by a group of black youths who were shouting at him and, saying, "Get your white such and such out of here," etc. So again, we're extremely polarized, and race has divided us, which is what the neo-Marxists who are in control right now of the government, the bureaucracy, the media. I never thought in my lifetime we'd have this resurgence or surgence of this rise of Marxism, but we're going through a cultural revolution, very much like destroyed China in the early years of Mao. And the economy is being intentionally deconstructed so as to cause a massive crisis, which this radical left thinks is required, the woke left, in order to destroy capitalism and to move into an era of new utopia. Every time this has been done by the communists, what it results in is war, mass starvation, millions of people die, and we're headed down the same track. I think it's preventable, but we're going to review some difficult news today, and I want to prepare you for what we need to do to deal with these situations. Let's deal with the first story I posted today, which is a story, again, about a couple of economic stories I want to cover. The first one is that this whole issue, let's see, I'll pick, I think, the banks. The loans the banks have out right now and mortgages are a problem. In 2007, 2008, when we had rising interest rates, the subprime real estate market collapsed. We had done the Democrats, going back to Clinton, had passed legislation demanding that banks had to give loans to people who were not economically qualified to have the mortgages. They got subsidized. And when interest rates went up, they couldn't pay the monthly mortgage. They lost their homes. They went into foreclosure. This caused the banks to fail, caused the cascading. The loans for the mortgages were packaged into commercial real estate collateralized security bonds. They were collateralized mortgage obligations sold to securities holders, sold to banks and other institutions. This was a very prominent thing in the late 1990s through the early 2000s. It's still done extensively. But today the problem is a little bit different. Today the banks are having a lot of loans that were given out through the Obama years, which are at 0 to 3%. And people are not selling their homes because they don't want to get a higher priced home as their next home at a 7% interest on a 30-year fixed mortgage. So the banks they're losing because now with interest rates headed north again and likely to continue going somewhat higher, they're about 5.5% right now. The banks at a 0% loan or at up to 3% loan are losing money because they're not earning interest earnings that are competitive with interest costs. And at the same time, these mortgages that they are losing, which will also increase as interest rates remain high, are losses to them as well on their asset portfolio. So they're getting a double hit on their asset portfolio. Their existing loans, mortgages and loans are banks' assets. Deposits are liabilities. It's almost kind of reverse of the way it's normally thought about. But if you've got a book of assets which have to be marked to market and are taking a hit because they have to have a discount, they're not as valuable assets as they were, including zero income or zero coupon treasury notes, which the banks have a lot of too. They're not worth par because you can't sell them for par because there are other treasuries available at a much higher interest rate. Okay, so the banks are headed towards another crisis, and it's only a matter of time until this builds where more banks start to fail. Right now, that's relatively stable, but again, that's reflected with the Federal Reserve saying they're trying to get a neutral interest rate. That's the first time I've ever heard that term. They made it up. They're saying, well, if we hold interest rates at about 5 or 5.5% and try to hold there for a while, inflation won't accelerate. It's going to continue, but it's not going to speed up. And unemployment, we're still going to get increase in unemployment, but the numbers are not going to accelerate dramatically. So we're in a holding pattern, which means the Federal Reserve has lost the power to really regulate the economy through interest rates. Our monetary policy is failing because our fiscal policy is abandoned. We are just printing money wildly. And this recent budget compromise that we did means that we're just going to continue printing money. The purchasing power of the dollar is decreasing dramatically. That's how you really measure inflation. What does $100 buy? Now, again, we're doing very well with this book. And I want people to take a look at it. If you can get a free copy of this book, and I'm going to take a minute and explain how. The book is The Coming Global Crash is going to create an historic gold rush. Okay, I've written it with Dean Heskin, who is the CEO of Swiss America, which has been a partner of mine for over 20 years. They're a very, very reputable precious metals company. And you can get the book free by calling this 800 number, which is Swiss America. They will talk to you about getting some of your IRAs, your 401ks, some of it in gold, holding some assets in gold. You take your today's dollars and buy a bit of gold. You don't have to buy thousands of dollars worth. You can, and that will appreciate over time. It will hold its purchasing power. We're going to see as the stock market begins to decline, as banks begin to fail, gold will go up in price. That's the historical nature of it. Now, to get this book free, to understand how this crash is going to occur and what you can do to prepare for it, 800-519-6268. Just call this 800 number, talk to Swiss America, and you get a free copy of the book. 800-519-6268 for those listening on audio. And you can also buy it on Amazon if you want to buy it directly. What the preparation is largely get out of debt, reduce your credit card debt, spend more, bring in your spending into means in terms of your income, and prepare for continued increases in prices in gasoline and food, which they do not include in the inflation index. Chris, would you like to comment on these first? I want to do one more story, then I'm going to let you comment. I want to do these two together. The second story is the commercial real estate, which is again still in crisis. The story is a Wall Street Journal story, which actually surprised me today. But they're saying that even though the businesses are trying to say everybody's got to come back to work downtown, trying to get tougher on the return to office policies, the buildings are remaining half empty. So the office attendance in big cities is nearly half of what it was in 2019. And company get tough measures are proving largely ineffective at boosting the number of people who come back to work in the offices. I'm not sure why that is, but again, people can work effectively from home in many cases. So Facebook parent, Meta, Amazon, JP Morgan Chase are among the companies that have recently vowed to get tougher on employees who do not show up. In August, Meta told employees they could face disciplinary action if they regularly violate new workplace rules. But these rules have not made much difference. People still are saying we're just going to stay home. Most employees go into offices during the middle of the week, but floors are sparsely occupied on Mondays and Fridays. In Chicago, some September days had a minimum rate of 66%, but was below 30% occupancy on Fridays in New York. It ranges from 25 to 65%, according to Castle Systems, which tracks the security card swipes to get into these buildings. So if we have this type of low occupancy, the national office occupancy vacancy rate rose to 19.2% last quarter, just below the historical high of 19.3% in 1991. Okay, so the problem is these commercial real estate buildings have to be refinanced. Usually they have a final payment, which is the principal, which is paid with the new loan. Most of these commercial real estate buildings are only paying interest on their monthly mortgage charges. And when they have to be refinanced, the buildings are going to be discounted, just like the assets to the banks on home loans. The banks also hold a lot of commercial real estate loans, and they're going to have to take losses when these properties are refinanced. Eventually, this massive amount of refinancing and the loss to the financial institutions of these properties that were held at a time when the homeowner mortgages or the amount of mortgages on the commercial real estate were profitable to the banks. The banks are now going to be taking substantial losses, and that's going to create a financial crisis. Again, it will hit the collateralized mortgage obligations. It will hit the derivatives. We are in a house of cards that's going to be like a controlled demolition of a building. It's going to come down stage by stage by stage, with each stage impacting the next. And we have a perfect storm here that's shaping up for an massive economic downturn. And I think if you've got money in IRAs or 401ks, my best advice right now is to double check to make sure you're not invested in any of the mutual funds that are invested in the stock market. Stock market could take some big hits here. Okay, Chris, now I think it's a good time to comment.
I might as well go down to Vegas and invest your money that way. If you're going to try to just go straight for stocks in this kind of, again, I'm kidding around here. I'm not a financial advisor, but that's kind of an interesting joke, at least in this particular economic climate.
Well, it is a casino right now. It looks like it's good, but the problem is that it may be at a high, and it doesn't hurt to take some profits out of the stock market when it's at a high and wait on the sidelines to see what happens next. At most, you may have to buy in at a higher price, but that's a lot less painful than having to take a 10 or 20 or 30% loss on your existing holdings. And today with the market, they may not come back very fast. It may take a long time before stocks return to where they are today, should there be a massive drop in the stock market.
Well, if the dollar somehow regains value and we stop printing all sorts of money, the quantitative easing, the after effects of the quantitative easing is going to hit the market pretty heavily sometime down the road. I believe it takes about, 8 months to a year, if I'm correct. And then so is the market a high really right now, since we're printing up a lot of money, or is it just a paper tiger?
I think the market is at a high right now. I think it's I think we could see signs as October builds and November, fourth quarter proceeds, and we get earnings statements coming in. I think a lot of corporations are on the edge right now. I was going to post a story that the port traffic in New Jersey is down about 20%, because companies are they're liquidating their inventories. They're not stocking up. You have a crisis in this country with retail outlets, both because of the Amazons of the world taking a lot of the retail trade, and also many of the retail stores are closing in cities that are unsafe. A lot of flagship stores are closing because the limited police and this defund the police movement and the politics where the police are looked upon as the, this Marxism where the police are looked upon as the oppressive enemy. Shopliftings, this massive youth riots and the smash and grab are costing retail outlets an enormous amount of money, and they're just shuttering down because it's not safe. It's not safe for the customers, and it's a loss with the amount that's being stolen. Let's cover a couple of stories now in international politics. And again, I wish I had better news to bring you, but Putin has declared that Russia is now going to do its first nationwide nuclear attack simulation. We're anticipating widespread nuclear strikes on the country, which is a clear indication that Putin is seeing that the war in Ukraine, especially if NATO persists in thinking it can win, and we continue to send more advanced weapons into Ukraine, the likelihood of it escalating with Russia using tactical nuclear weapons, which I envision they could use on Kiev, that would end a lot of problems for Russia, that would destroy the Ukrainian government, which essentially is a criminal government, largely, I think, stealing huge amounts of these billions we're giving them. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And this Zelensky has strong ties to a lot of the oligarchs like Kolomoisky, who is a banker, very involved in Burisma, which was the natural gas company that Hunter Biden was on the board. And all this corruption with Joe Biden, I think, is going to get aired here in a series of hearings, which is going to lead to a vote to impeach on the House floor. If Putin is going through this kind of a doomsday test, and by the way, when I read about it, when I'm looking at it right now, that there's a secondary threat to the nuclear power plants and other facilities. You could have Chernobyls and a nuclear attack that would occur in Russia, despite and in addition to the nuclear disaster, which could, with these weapons, could wipe out major cities, could have a huge loss of population. So they're going to do a drill. You don't do drills unless you're anticipating that the likelihood of a nuclear war is increasing. Also, Russia is going to do a nuclear test in the Arctic Circle very soon here. And all of these are signs of escalating warfare in Ukraine and escalating instability worldwide. Again, I would include Iran in that instability because Iran is in the process of developing nuclear weapons, and Iran has moved closer to China and Russia. Now, there was a story today that in Ukraine, the average age of soldiers at the front is over 40 years. So they are older soldiers fighting. And I believe the New York Times today is running a very interesting piece. They've got a lot of video of some of the fighting going on around Bakhmut. And when you take a look at the fighting going on in Ukraine, it's, first of all, kind of like an electronic battlefield. It's like almost a video game where you've got drones and you've got satellites directing missiles to hit targets. But it looks like a wasteland. Buildings are bombed out. There's no trees. There's craters everywhere. Soldiers are fighting desperately to try to stay alive. The Russian soldiers are hunkered down in the basements of these destroyed buildings. And it's inch by inch trying to take back territory for Ukraine. And they're not doing a very good job of it. This massive offensive that was promised for the summer has fizzled. I think this Ukraine war is teetering on the edge of going to another more dangerous state. And it's pointless that we're fighting this. The whole idea of pushing NATO to the edge of Russia, which is a bad idea because Russia, as a major power, like we want a buffer zone, a sphere of influence. One time we thought our sphere of influence should be the Western Hemisphere. At this point, with Canada going completely socialist, with the border wide open. The neo-Marxists have really reconstructed a reality here, which is extremely dangerous. But the point is, Russia needs access to the Atlantic. It wants it through Finland. NATO wants to put Finland in NATO. This all stems from the Democrats in the State Department. If you'll remember the impeachment hearings over Donald Trump talking to Zelensky over phone and daring to ask about Biden's corruption, the State Department has a policy and has had to get NATO into Ukraine. And it goes back to the Maidan revolution or rebellion, which occurred in years ago, 2014, that period of time when Soros and Obama were funding all of these color revolutions, which they said were popular uprisings, that were democracy movements. They were really just trying in Ukraine to oust a duly elected president, Yanukovych, and they succeeded in doing it. It was a coup d'etat. It was a staged rebellion, and it was crafted by the State Department, which had learned how to produce these uprisings. They did it in Egypt. They did it across North Africa. They did it in Ukraine. And they were trying to expand NATO in Ukraine and in Finland. Even in 1939, a prelude to World War II, when they had Stalin and Hitler had a non-aggression pact, Stalin moved into Finland and he moved into Ukraine because he wanted to secure both, anticipating that he would be at war with Hitler one way or the other. And Finland failed, but the Ukraine, Russia made significant advances into. The eastern part of Ukraine, this Donbass area, has always been Russian-speaking. Ukraine's a divided country. The West is German-influenced and Polish-influenced, and it was Nazi during World War II. And despite it not being reported, there are still Nazi brigades with Nazi symbols, neo-Nazis fighting for Zelensky, and he's happy to have it done. Okay, I want to end on this climate change. There's an article coming out of Great Britain right now, and it's on this net zero watch, which is showing that through the summer, which is ending, we're rapidly heading into fall. That's called climate change seasons. The Office of National Statistics in Great Britain was saying that there were these excess deaths because of the heat wave of 2022, and they were pumping that it is now not global warming, it's global burning. If you remember that dialogue, these narratives last only a little bit of time. They're lies. Well, you had a lot of very frightening reports coming out. Sky News looked at the data for 2018 to 2022, concluded that London had the highest mortality risk from hot weather of above 29 degrees Celsius. They pointed out the figures overall showed a dramatic increase in 2022 from the previous year, the number of temperature-related deaths on hot days that more than doubled from 1990 to 2022. And these reports were common. The BBC reported the story and said that the heat-related deaths had increased in recent years due to climate change and global warming. The BBC went on to say the data suggested that 3,000 more over 65 residents of London or Great Britain died than usual in England and Wales last summer. 3,000. They also did the same as Sky News in finding someone who clearly hadn't looked too closely at the data. And they cited this so-called climate expert as saying climate change isn't just something that's happening in the Antarctic or very hot countries. It is impacting lives, taking lives right here in the UK. Well, when you look at the data doesn't show that. So there's no real change in the normalized extreme weather deaths. It's clear that there was an increase in 2022 over 2021, but it was similar to the increase seen between 1993 and 1995. The deaths from cold greatly exceed heat deaths. And that's the issue that's not discussed. Cold is much more dangerous. We don't really want to go back to global cooling, a global, another ice age. And I'm going to emphasize and stress that my new book coming out is going to explain why all this is. The first book I wrote was The Truth About Climate Change, Energy, Climate Change, and Global Warming. This book, which is about to come out in the next few days, it's up on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. And it's exposing the woke insanity in this age of disinformation. So my first book on this was, they look similar. I did this, it's a trilogy, the Great Awakening trilogy. This one about energy, global warming, climate change, which says that the left lies. This is bogus science. This is why they lie, because it's a neo-Marxist agenda. They want to destroy capitalism by getting us not to use hydrocarbon fuels. Yesterday, we covered the report from the Club of Rome, which was founded in the 60s by Kissinger, Brzezinski, Soros. And they came out with a report in 1991 saying that they needed an existential threat to destroy capitalism. And the best way to do it was to scare people over weather. By using hydrocarbon fuels, we were going to cause global warming. And that was discussed in 1991. Here we are 30 years later, and it's happening. It took them 30 years to architect that narrative. The truth is, what we're going to experience, I think, is a surge in gold. 1980, after Jimmy Carter's economic disaster, gold went to $843 an ounce. 2007, 2008, gold went to $1,400 an ounce when we had that subprime real estate. Get a copy of the free book. And the number is on the homepage. Take a look at our homepage. That's all the different sites where we are broadcasting up in the upper right-hand corner and the social media. I'm going to repeat the number for the free copy of the book on the economic crash and the rise of gold. The number is 1-800-519-6268. 1-800-519-6268. Take a look at Amazon. We've got another book coming out, which is on the Live Longer and Better. We'll post that on our site very quickly here. But you can see I'm writing it with Chris Burries, who is the founder and CEO of My Vital C, SES Research. My Vital C, which is one of our sponsors, it's on our homepage. Chris will show you where. Just go to the sponsors. My Vital C is a carbon 60. It's a remarkable molecule. Try it. Comes in a lot of different products. It's able to be consumed in olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. This is the best company doing it. These were the two founders, worked with the Nobel Prize winners in Rice University, who 40 years ago discovered carbon 60. It's a molecule with 60 carbon atoms in a cage structure like a geodesic dome. They're called fullerenes after Buckminster Fuller. I've been taking carbon 60, My Vital C, and olive oil for 4 years. It was recommended to me by an Israeli physician when I was dealing with the Mueller investigation, one of the most stressful times of my life. And I have more energy. I'm 77 years old right now. Just turned that in August. And I have more energy and more involved in business and writing than I have been maybe ever in my life. The colors come back into my hair. I'm not dyeing it. It was completely gray. The products are also for pets. I think you're going to like these if you try it. And please do take a look at the book. It's just now coming out. Live Longer and Better. We'll have it up on the website here the next few days. Chris, any final comments before we wrap up?
I don't know. I seem to like the idea of trying that bacon flavor. Unfortunately, it's for pets, but I'd like that for adults. Why don't they let us take the pet sample?
You
I'll eat
probably
anything
sure.
bacon flavored.
Well, that's probably a winner for a lot of people.
There we go. I watched an interesting program, International Reporters Roundtable on NTD television. You can find it on Epic TV's website as well. There was, and I know I might open a can of worms here. There is one commentator who said that it's not the money that's going to Ukraine that's the big problem, which I disagree with that. That's part of it. He says it's also the execution. They're getting lesser quality weapons. They're coming in late. The money's funneling different ways. It's rather interesting that not only are we throwing a lot of money willy-nilly into these things, like Matt Gaetz said, it's not. We're not even sure where it's going or how well or unwell it's being executed at this point.
There's no accountability of the money.
Right. There we go.
There's no accountability. The weapons manufacturers and the weapons dealers are making a fortune. They're getting their payday, just like the pharmaceutical companies got their payday during COVID. I am starting up telemedicine companies again. I have we're launching a Spanish speaking telemedicine service for Spanish speaking people to be connected with Spanish speaking physicians at a reasonable cost. And we don't care about documentation. If anyone's here in the United States, they deserve to be healthy. And there are very few Spanish speaking doctors in the country compared to the population. It's called Habla, Habla, which means speak, con, CONUNMD, which means speak with an MD, hablaconunmd.com. That's launching. With Chris Burries, I'm also going to be launching getlongevitymeds.com. And there's going to be quite a few medications that you can get that will improve issues of aging, help you to live longer. The book does demonstrate that it is possible to live longer, more actively, and more healthy. I myself have lost a considerable amount of weight. I did that intentionally over several years, and have really done what I can to extend life and remain productive. You can too. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. We may have to go through a judgment of God. We need to engage in 2 Chronicles 7:14. Join me. I'm getting down on my knees, asking God to forgive us for having taken God out of our lives, out of our schools, killing so many millions of babies in the womb. We can, if we do this, what biblically we're admonished is that God will hear our prayer and heal our land. I think we do need God's intervention at this point. And I think it will come because the truth prevails. I'm writing books, the truth about energy and global warming, the truth about neo-Marxism and anarchy and cultural Maoism. The truth is what we need right now. This program is thetruthcentral.com. Spread the word. I'm going to get more active on social media. And thank you for joining us. Let others know about the program. Like it, share it, get the word out there. We're shadow banned all over the place. And we're going to be working very hard in the coming months to reestablish a very strong platform on which the truth can be brought forward. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Tuesday. It's October 3rd, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing these podcasts every weekday. God bless.